In a single moment, every perfect plan for Delta Flight 466 shattered. Passengers were seated, the doors were closed, but the one thing that couldn't take off was the pilot's confidence. In that peaceful instant, a shocking decision erupted. The veteran captain refused to fly this Boeing 757 into the sky. Not because of a storm, not because of any logged malfunction, but because of a terrifying gut feeling forged by tens of thousands of flight hours. What would make a top expert defy an entire technical system that gave the all clear? Was this instinct actually saving hundreds of lives from an unimaginable disaster? Delta Flight 466 from Atlanta to Las Vegas was supposed to be nothing more than another routine trip across the country. The flight was scheduled for the evening of August 16, 2025, from Hartsfield-Jackson, the busiest airport in America, where thousands of departures and arrivals happen every day. Inside the cabin, passengers were already seated, bags stored neatly in the overhead bins, and the quiet buzz of travelers filled the air. Everything pointed toward a normal takeoff, the kind of flight no one would remember once they landed in Nevada. Then, within minutes, everything changed. A sudden announcement came over the intercom. The plane assigned for the journey was being replaced, and the departure would be delayed by more than an hour. At first, most passengers assumed this was the usual problem of scheduling, maybe a small maintenance issue or a late arriving aircraft. Delays happen in aviation all the time, and for travelers in and out of Atlanta, waiting a little longer was frustrating but not unusual. But this was different. The reason did not come from the airline system or a late crew report. It came from the captain himself. That fact immediately gave the situation a strange weight, because in commercial aviation, it is rare for the person in command of the flight to stop everything and refuse to take the assigned aircraft. The decision stunned people on board, but at the same time, it also planted a deep question in their minds. If a veteran captain was willing to delay hundreds of passengers, interrupt the airline's tight schedule, and even risk financial consequences, what exactly did he see? This was not the kind of refusal that could be brushed aside as inconvenience. It suggested something personal, something only he could sense, and it turned a simple trip into a moment of suspense. The cabin shifted from calm expectation to restless whispers, and everyone began to wonder what was wrong with the plane sitting just outside the window. Was there a hidden danger that only an experienced eye could detect? Or was this a decision based on pure instinct, impossible to explain with a checklist or a manual? The scene set the stage for a mystery that reached beyond one flight because it raised doubts about the balance between human judgment and mechanical certainty. For the passengers, the flight was delayed. For the captain, the question was far heavier. Could he trust a machine that gave him reason to hesitate? And for the rest of us watching the story unfold, the real suspense had only begun. So what was wrong with the 757 that looked fine to everyone else but made a captain refuse to fly it? The answer lies in the plane's history just a day before. The story of Flight 466 takes a darker turn when we look at the aircraft that was first assigned for the journey. This was a Boeing 757 that had flown the day before from Miami to Atlanta with the same captain in command. During that earlier flight, something happened that most passengers never noticed, but every pilot would treat with caution. The captain reported problems with the elevator control system, the set of moving surfaces on the tail that keep a plane stable during takeoff, climb, and landing. If these controls fail, the aircraft can quickly become impossible to handle, and even small malfunctions can put hundreds of lives at risk. After landing in Atlanta, the captain passed the report to Delta's maintenance team, known as Tech Ops, who immediately inspected the jet. They ran checks, examined the flight control systems, and reviewed the data, but the final conclusion was simple. No faults were found, and the plane was declared safe for service. To the airline, the aircraft was ready to fly again, cleared by both computer diagnostics and human inspection. But to the man who had flown it just hours before, something still did not feel right. When the same 757 was assigned to him for Flight 466, he refused to take it. That refusal is what makes this story so unusual, because pilots rarely say no to an aircraft unless the evidence is clear. The decision raised a disturbing possibility. Had the captain noticed a subtle sign, maybe in the way the controls responded, that maintenance could not reproduce? Or was there a hidden fault, the kind that appears only under certain conditions, waiting to strike at the worst possible moment? The plane itself sat quietly at the gate, looking no different from the other jets lined up on the tarmac. To the passengers watching from the terminal windows, it seemed like any other aircraft, clean and ready for departure. But behind the scenes, a battle of judgment was already unfolding between human instinct and machine records. The captain had seen enough in his career to know when to trust the system and when to trust his own eyes. And this time, he chose the latter. So why would a veteran aviator with thousands of hours of experience defy both the airline's maintenance report and the clock of a busy schedule? The answer lies not only in skill, but also in the rare weight of intuition built over decades. A decision like this only makes sense when we understand the man behind it. The captain of Flight 466 was not a newcomer or a pilot still learning the limits of his aircraft. He carried more than 25 years of experience and had logged over 20,000 hours on the Boeing 757 alone. That level of familiarity meant he could sense details invisible to others, the kind of subtle differences in how the jet handled that computers often reduce to numbers but never fully explain. When he spoke to the passengers, he chose honesty over convenience. He told them clearly that he respected the maintenance team, but his instincts told him the aircraft was not right for that flight. This was not a message crafted for drama. It was a calm statement from someone who had flown through storms, dealt with emergencies, and learned that even the smallest irregularity could become life-threatening once in the air. To many observers, what stood out was his admission that this was the first time in more than a decade that he had turned down an aircraft. That fact carried weight because it showed how rarely such a step is taken. Pilots are trained to trust procedure, and they know the consequences of disrupting schedules, yet this captain was willing to stand firm. It was not just confidence, it was a mix of discipline, memory, and judgment collected from thousands of flights. Some might call it intuition, but for him it was more like a second layer of training, a silent warning built from years of experience. He understood that passengers may never see what a pilot sees in the cockpit. A slight resistance in the controls or an unusual vibration might feel small, but those signs could mark the beginning of something far more dangerous. By refusing the aircraft, he was not acting out of fear, but out of responsibility, and the applause he received from the cabin proved that people sensed the gravity of his choice. Still, this left one haunting question. If his instincts told him the jet was unsafe, why did the official inspection report say otherwise? The next part of the story reveals how the maintenance team handled the aircraft after his refusal and why their silence only made the mystery deeper. When the captain refused the aircraft, Delta's maintenance team had no choice but to hold the 757 on the ground for a full inspection. For the next 9 hours, technicians worked through the night, checking the flight control system piece by piece, focusing on the elevators at the tail, the very surfaces the pilot had questioned. They reviewed the data logs, ran diagnostic tests, and even conducted manual checks to look for signs of wear or mechanical strain. Every test came back clean, and by morning the report was clear. no faults detected. On paper, the jet was perfectly healthy. The finding was both reassuring and unsettling. For passengers, it meant the plane could fly again, and indeed it did, completing later flights without any recorded problems. But for those who knew the backstory, the absence of evidence only deepened the mystery. How could an experienced captain sense something wrong that no system could confirm? In modern aviation, computers are trusted to monitor every detail, from engine performance to control movement, yet technology is not flawless. There are rare situations where a defect hides between the lines of data, appearing only under certain stresses or conditions that cannot be recreated on the ground. Pilots sometimes describe these as ghost faults, problems that live in the feel of the machine rather than in its numbers. That possibility turned the captain's refusal into more than a personal choice. It became a reminder of the limits of engineering. The silence from maintenance was not meant to dismiss his concerns, but it raised an uncomfortable truth. If a system can miss a fault that a pilot can feel, then who should be believed? The official record said the jet was safe, yet the memory of that hesitation lingered like a shadow over the aircraft's future flights. To the airline, the issue was closed, but to the public, the unanswered question stayed alive. And so the focus shifted away from the machines and toward the people inside the cabin, because their reaction revealed something even more powerful than the reports. What did the passengers think when they realized the man at the controls had chosen to stop everything? At first, the passengers of Flight 466 were confused and unsettled when they heard the plane was being changed at the last minute. Travelers whispered to each other, wondering if this was just another airline delay or if something more serious was happening outside their view. The air in the cabin was tense, and many felt a mix of frustration and worry because no one likes to be told that their journey has suddenly been pushed back without explanation. Then the captain stepped forward and spoke to them directly. His words were calm and steady as he explained that while he respected the maintenance team, his instincts told him the aircraft was not right for this flight. It was a moment of honesty that passengers rarely see, and the effect was immediate. The cabin filled with applause, not because of the delay, but because people understood that their safety was being placed above convenience. In that moment, the authority of the pilot outweighed the frustration of lost time, and the travelers recognized that transparency is sometimes the most powerful reassurance. What began as confusion turned into respect and even relief, because the passengers realized they were in the hands of someone willing to make the harder choice. Yet the applause also left behind an unanswered question. If the captain believed the jet was unsafe while the official inspection said otherwise, then where does the real truth lie? The immediate result of the captain's refusal was a significant delay, but safety was never in doubt. Delta quickly arranged for another Boeing 757-200 to replace the grounded jet, and after a wait of just over an hour, the passengers continued their journey to Las Vegas. The arrival at Harry Reid International came 1 hour and 3 minutes later than planned, yet everyone reached their destination without further issues. For the travelers, the episode became more than an inconvenience. It turned into a story they would never forget, a reminder that behind every flight number, there are human decisions shaping the outcome. Meanwhile, the aircraft that had been rejected did not sit idle. Delta's maintenance team conducted a detailed inspection that lasted 9 hours, focusing especially on the elevator system described by the pilot. Technicians ran checks again and again, but no mechanical cause could be confirmed. The official report stated that the plane was airworthy, and soon after, it returned to service and completed later flights without incident. Still, the fact remained that one of the airline's most seasoned pilots had felt something was wrong, and that decision had forced the company to dedicate valuable resources to prove otherwise. For Delta, the cost was not only in time and money, but also in public perception, because stories like this always spark debate about whether machines or instincts should be trusted more. The result was a safe trip, but the consequence was a question that lingered far beyond the arrival gate. If an aircraft can pass every test and still make a captain say no, then what does that tell us about the hidden risks of modern aviation? In commercial aviation, the final word on whether a flight takes off does not come from the airline or the maintenance team, but from the captain sitting in the cockpit. This authority, often called go or no-go, gives one person the responsibility to decide if hundreds of lives and millions of dollars of equipment will leave the ground. It is a rule built into aviation law, and it is respected across the industry because history has shown that one cautious decision can prevent disaster. The case of Delta Flight 466 is a striking reminder of how absolute that power can be. Even when the maintenance department declared the Boeing 757 safe, the captain's refusal immediately grounded it, no questions asked. There was no debate in front of the passengers, no vote between crew members, and no override from management. The moment the captain said no, the airplane stayed where it was. That kind of authority is rare in modern industries where decisions are usually shared among teams, but in aviation it exists for one simple reason: safety cannot wait for committee approval. The financial impact of this authority can be huge. A delayed or canceled flight can cost an airline tens of thousands of dollars in fuel, crew hours, and passenger compensation, while also disrupting schedules across the network. Yet those losses are accepted because the alternative, even the smallest chance of a catastrophe, carries a price that no company can afford. This is why the refusal of an experienced captain caught so much attention. It was not just an act of instinct, it was the system working exactly as it was designed, placing human judgment above machinery and profit. But it also exposed a deeper tension. If a veteran pilot can overrule both engineering reports and company procedures, then what does that say about the reliability of the checks passengers trust every day? The applause in the cabin showed people felt safer when the human voice had the last word, but for the industry, the story raised a more difficult question. Is this event proof that pilots are still the strongest safeguard in aviation, or does it reveal a hidden weakness in the technology that claims to keep us safe? The clearest picture of what happened on Flight 466 comes from the voices of the pilots themselves. Both the captain and the first officer later gave statements that offered insight into why the refusal was made and how rare such a decision really is. Their words carried weight because, unlike company press releases or technical reports, these came directly from the men who sat at the controls that day. The captain explained that his decision was not meant to cast doubt on Delta's maintenance team, which he openly praised as one of the most skilled groups in the industry. He stressed that he had complete trust in their abilities, yet he also reminded the public that trust does not erase responsibility. In his own words, not finding a problem does not mean a problem does not exist. That sentence quickly became the headline because it spoke to the very core of aviation safety, the line between what is measurable and what is felt. He revealed that in more than 22 years of flying, this was the first time he had ever refused an aircraft. The weight of that fact was hard to ignore. When a professional with thousands of hours in the cockpit says no after decades of always saying yes, the meaning goes far beyond a single flight. The first officer added his perspective, making clear that this was not an isolated act of caution. He explained that the last time he personally declined an aircraft was 7 years earlier, and he emphasized how extraordinary it is for pilots to take such steps. For both men, the refusal was not about convenience, comfort, or even personal preference. It was about duty, the kind of responsibility that does not allow second guesses once a decision is made. Their combined testimony highlighted a truth that the public rarely sees. Even in the age of advanced diagnostics and digital monitoring, the human element remains a critical layer of defense. The statements also reassured passengers that such refusals are not common and are only made under the most serious conditions. Far from suggesting panic, they revealed a quiet confidence in their training and a willingness to put lives above schedules or financial costs. What the crew shared turned a technical issue into a larger lesson, one about humility in the face of machines that cannot always explain themselves. It showed that experience speaks in ways data cannot, and when that voice speaks, it deserves to be heard. Yet their honesty also created a new challenge for the airline and the wider industry. If pilots openly admit that problems can hide from official tests, how should the system adapt to prevent those hidden threats from slipping through? The incident with Flight 466 quickly drew the attention of aviation experts because it highlighted the balance of power between machines, companies, and the people who fly their planes. The Airline Pilots Association, known as ALPA, released a statement that praised commercial pilots as the final authority on safety. Its president, Captain Jason Ambrosi, emphasized that pilots bring not only technical skill but also judgment that cannot be replaced by data alone. He explained that every flight depends on this human element, and even in a system designed to be safe, decisions made in the cockpit add an extra shield of protection. Legal experts pointed out that the captain's choice was protected by law. Under federal regulations, specifically 14 CFR 91.3, the pilot in command has the ultimate authority to decide whether an aircraft is safe to fly. This rule exists because responsibility cannot be shared when lives are at stake, and the law makes clear that the captain is accountable for both the aircraft and everyone on board. Analysts also reminded the public that pilots can refuse a flight for many reasons, not only mechanical concerns. Bad weather, fatigue, or even disruptive passengers can justify a cancellation because anything that threatens safety is considered valid. What stood out in this case was that the reason came from a sense that something was not right, even when the technical systems insisted everything was fine. That is why many experts saw this as more than a single story. They called it a warning about the limits of technology, especially as airlines increasingly rely on computer-driven checks to keep schedules moving. The lesson was not that machines fail often, but that even the most advanced systems have blind spots, and sometimes only the pilot's experience can see what is missing. For passengers, the event became a rare window into how decisions are really made before takeoff. For the industry, it was a reminder that safety rests not only in data, but also in the instincts of the men and women at the controls. So, the mystery of Delta Flight 466 ends not with a shocking mechanical discovery, but with something far more powerful: the unwavering value of human judgment. This event proves that in our high-tech world, a veteran's instinct, built from 25 years of experience, remains an irreplaceable layer of safety. The captain's courageous "no" protected hundreds of lives, reminding us that true security isn't just about perfect data, but about the wisdom to question it. It's a powerful lesson in trust. Trust in the experts who silently guard our lives and the systems that empower them to put safety above all else every single time.